we move into week 7. We're already 2/3 of the way through this season, so now we're getting down to the final 3 weeks. We're starting to see some separation of some of these teams. That playoff picture is really starting to open up. Obviously, I've gotten a lot of criticism for the first projections that we had last week, but it is what it is. I mean, you can only do the best of what you can with the information that you have, and trends are constantly shifting up and down depending on how teams play. It's nothing new, but as the weeks keep moving forward, that picture keeps becoming more and more clear. And that's where the fun of it is. So, obviously, with week 6 complete, there will be changes made to our playoff projections as we move forward. Obviously, we had some big games here in the NUIC this past week. A lot of close games, a couple blowouts, not too many. One of the biggest ones was the Forreston West Carroll game where Forreston won 38-36. A lot of people didn't see that coming. But if you take a look at West Carroll's resume to this point, they have a loss to EPC, which you could render that a bad loss. But if you take a look at EPC's strength of schedule and you compare that to other teams, EPC is just an unfortunate 2-4 team that could easily have been a playoff team. But they most likely won't make the playoffs this year. They're on the outside looking in right now. They're not eliminated, but they're on the cusp. Obviously, the Aquin EPC game was a big one as well, as Aquin pulled out that one 34-27. And then a big one that kind of went the other direction was the Stockton Du-Pec game. A lot of people thought that was going to be a back-and-forth game, which turned out into Stockton actually controlling the majority of that game in a 28-0 win for the Blackhawks. So, as we move forward into week 7, you know, there's going to be even bigger matchups as you have Stockton and Orangeville. Orangeville needs to get a win in a bad way in this game, but Stockton also wants to become playoff eligible. Du-Pec and East Dubuque is a game that people cannot overlook, as Du-Pec is going to need to win that game to get to win number 5 to become playoff eligible, as they have West Carroll and Lena Winslow waiting for them in weeks 8 and 9. And then we have our game of the year is finally here, the one that everybody's been waiting on, Forreston and Lena Winslow. So a lot of people are looking forward to that game, obviously. A lot of people around the state are wanting to see how that correlates into what Central A&M down south is, what Tuscola is, what Arcola is, what Athens is, just to get an idea of what's DeKalb going to look like come November. And you can't forget other teams up here as well with Aurora Christian, Anawan, Wethersfield, Princeville, and of course Chicago Hope as well. I mean, it's going to be a loaded playoff field in Class 1A this year. Taking a look at some games around the state, obviously A&M moved up to 6-0, where they beat Shelbyville. Athens is still 5-1 after beating Pittsfield. They have a big game this week as they take on Maroa Forsyth, though, so that'll be a good telling sign between those two teams. Chicago Hope did beat Bismarck Henning, who is getting large votes in Class 2A, as they pulled out a 33-28 win there. As expected, Aurora Christian did lose to Wheaton St. Francis, but you got to remember, St. Francis is ranked in Class 4A, as was Immaculate Conception, who they lost to last week. This week, they're playing Bishop McNamara, who's also ranked in 4A. But Bishop McNamara, with the trend of the cutoff line going upward, Bishop McNamara will probably fall into Class 3A. But either way, Aurora Christian is going to be on life support because they still have to beat Guerin, which they should, they will, and they got to beat Wheaton Academy as well. Down south at Camp Point Central lost to Beardstown. Beardstown is ranked number 4 in Class 3A, and that game was a 31-14 win. But if you remember last year, Camp Point Central still made it to the state championship game, even losing to Beardstown last year. Tuscola, as we already stated, they're still in it. They're projected to finish 7-2. They moved up to 4-2 with their win. Morrison is still undefeated and now projected to finish the season undefeated at 9-0. That's a team for 1A North to watch out for as well, as we forgot to mention them, but we're not overlooking the Mustangs, because what they've done this year in the Three Rivers Conference is basically brought themselves back up to prominence, probably a little bit earlier than people expected them to, because the picture window for Morrison right now is really looking at 2020, 2021. And
a lot of 20s.
Yes, lots of 20s. But, you know, they're here and they're making a lot of noise, and they're getting prepared for a state championship type style run as well. Move over to Class 2A. Again, you know, Clifton Central stays perfect. Fieldcrest stays perfect with their big win over Deer Creek Mackinac. Bismarck Henning, like we said, they lost to Chicago. Hope. Moreau Forsyth beat Porta. Again, they have that big matchup coming up this week with Athens. Depending on how that game goes, they'll win out the remainder of the way. They should. GCMS beat Tri-Valley. Newman improves to 5-1. St. Teresa improves to 5-1. And then you have the bottom three, the Pana, Nashville, and Knoxville, all improved to 6-0. And I only call them the bottom three because when you're looking at the state rankings, you know, these teams are typically 3A teams that are going to probably, most likely, projectively, move into Class 2A this year. But they also have a history of short playoff runs. Granted, they have solid teams this year, so you can't go in overlooking them, as a lot of people are considering them as being top 10 type teams. Orion had a big loss to Fulton, a close game, so it wasn't really a big loss. It wasn't a big loss.
It was 27-26.
But that was a game that you really thought that Orion would have the upper hand in, so it was kind of more of an upset, really. And then, you know, take a look further down. Breeze Matter Die beat Quincy Notre Dame. I know right now the AP poll has both those teams in Class 3A, but the way everything is trending and projecting, those teams will end up in 2A as well. So lots of things are going on across the state, both Class 1A and 2A. Right now the trend for 1A is right around that 305 to 309 mark, which historically is where it's been for at least the past 12 years on average. The Class 2A trend is actually upward. Right now, it's right around the 426 mark, where normally it's between that 395 to 400 mark. At times, even as low as 389, 390. So this year, 2A is looking to be higher up, and with that, it's going to push 3A up higher, and that's how Bishop Mack is most likely, at least right now, projected to fall back into 3A, which, you know, it's going to be a big concern for a lot of teams in 3A, as, you know, if you take a look at 3A, you have Byron, you have Williamsville, and Wilmington. I don't remember where Coal City's at. Pretty sure they're still sitting in 4A, but if they were to fall into 3A, that would strengthen up the 3A bracket just a little bit more. But anyway, we're going to get ready to break down our games going into Week 7 right now. This week we're going to start in the north, where Dakota will travel back to the west as they take on Galena. Last week they faced East Dubuque, that's why I said it that way. 2 long trips in a row. Dakota comes in at 3-3. Galena comes in at 1-5. Last week Dakota beat East Dubuque 28-12, where Galena got their first one of the season, beating Amboy 41-6. Last year Dakota won this game in Week 1 35-0. They also won it the year before in Week 1 35-0.
Do you think they'll be 35-0 this year?
No, I do not.
I don't either.
No, I do not. Obviously, we've seen Dakota play a couple times, and we were able to watch Galena play the one game that we saw them in, and then, you know, we've seen them on film a little bit here and there. And one of the things that you can look at with Galena is they're really starting to turn into what an Aquin is doing, what a West Carroll is doing, what East Dubuque is doing. And granted, if you take a look at Dakota's pass defense this year, it's been exceptionally great. They're only giving up about 55 yards a game in pass defense. And I could not tell you how many interceptions they have, but they have a boatload. Which is a great improvement for Dakota from a couple of years ago where their pass defense was somewhat average. This year they've really picked it up though, and they've done an excellent job at the pass coverage. The rush defense needs to come up a little bit. They sit back a little too much rather than attacking the gaps. If they can get that going, that will help the Indians out as they move forward down the road. Galena, on the other hand, obviously we've already mentioned last week, turnover issues. Obviously they didn't have it this past week against Amboy, but if they can continue to improve now that they have Heffel at quarterback and moved Anderson out, I have not seen Peyton Bauer return yet, so that's still a huge loss for the Pirates at this time. And it will be until he does return. I'm not sure the extent of what his injury is, when he'll return. Hopefully it's soon, at least for Galena's sake. But really impressed with Heffel at quarterback, though.
I was thinking the same thing. Anderson was great. I don't want to take anything away from him. But we did have an opportunity to see Heffel, and I was very impressed.
Yeah, the way he reads, he's got a great arm. He's shifty, so he can move. Anderson was no different. What I really liked about Anderson was that you can definitely tell he's a competitor. But Heffel's got a big arm. Obviously, he's only a sophomore, so he's got some time in front of him to grow, and this experience right now is really building him up for the next couple of years. And, it's been one of those things for the last 2 years. We've mentioned it, and you could see it. The growth of Galena starting to get stronger. And people have already said, is Galena better than their record?
Absolutely, without a question.
Exactly. You cannot go in overlooking this game with Galena. If you're Dakota, you got to be ready to play. You're only sitting at 3-3. You go in overlooking anybody at this point.
And then you're 3-4.
Yeah, and you're sitting out. You got a couple. If you're Dakota, you got a couple tough games still coming up. You have Galena, Orangeville, and then Stockton to finish out the season. So it's going to be tough. Galena, I think, will give them a game. I'm not expecting a 35-0 score this year. If Dakota does get a shutout, I'll be more impressed by that, to be honest. I think Galena will get some points on the board, much like East Dubuque did last week. But I still like the Indians in this game.
I'm going to have to agree, but it was definitely one to contemplate.
Yep. Du-Pec at East Dubuque. Du-Pec comes in with a 4-2 mark, and East Dubuque comes in at 2-4. As last week, Du-Pec lost to Stockton 28-0, and East Dubuque lost to Dakota 28-12. Last year, these two met in Week 7, where Du-Pec won 26-14. Taking a look at this matchup this year, obviously East Dubuque is on their deathbed, in order to stay in contention to make a run at the playoffs. And they have a hard schedule left in front of them. They have Du-Pec coming this week. Then they have to go to Stockton and go to Galena to finish out the season. Du-Pec, on the other hand, has a tough schedule in front of them as well.
But on the same hand.
So, while they have the prettier picture right now, this game against East Dubuque is going to be a must-win game for the Rivermen.
Likewise. A must-win game for East Dubuque.
Correct.
Basically, somebody has to win.
Well, that's always given, right? But yes, if there's a game that you have to give give
it's
your
always
all.
the game that's in front of you.
Right.
They're Mr. Philosopher.
It is, but this one's the big one
I-
for both teams, based off their finishing schedules. So, with that said, obviously Du-Pec laid an egg last week against Stockton, and a lot of people.
Well, Stockton had great motivational quotes.
They did. We'll get to that part
Okay,
later.
Sorry.
I got something for that. But obviously, the Du-Pec superfan was able to give Stockton some motivation for
I
that.
thought you just said you were saving that for later. So.
Well, I was going to say
Okay.
the Stockton side. But, you know, the superfan part, obviously a lot of people in Du-Pec are not happy with whoever this person is. And quite frankly, I don't blame them. East Dubuque, on the other hand, they've done really well.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, they lost to Dakota here. Really excited to see their quarterback, Zach Meyer, play.
Mm-hmm.
We've mentioned, you know, a few different players for East Dubuque, and you can really see things coming along for them. They do have quite a few seniors this year, so things could, you know, fall off going into next year. But I think what they're doing right now is they're building things up. They're very competitive this year.
They're very athletic. I mean, and
very
I think
athletic.
I said this last week. They're athletic like every team seems to be.
Yeah. The only problem is the line play, and honestly, Du-Pec has the same issues right now. You take a look at the two losses that Du-Pec has, and they're to Dakota and Stockton, two teams that really just said, hey, we're going to run it at you, try and stop us. And they obviously had a lot of success with it.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, Du-Pec has things that they need to work on. One of those is run defense. They're really great at pass defense. In this matchup with East Dubuque, I think it's going to favor Du-Pec because of their experience in the passing game.
Mm-hmm.
East Dubuque, likewise, has, like you said, they have quite a few athletes. This is going to be an exciting game. I could see this game going back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
In order for Du-Pec to get to the playoffs, like their goal is this year, to keep their program rising up in their third year, this has to be a must-win because you have West Carroll and Lena Winslow coming up.
Yep.
And those games are going to be extremely tough for Du-Pec to get wins in. But this week, I do like the Rivermen.
Who do you think are going to take?
Tell them.
Let's go with the Rivermen.
We head over to Orangeville, where Stockton will come into town to play the Broncos. Stockton comes in with a 4-2 mark. Orangeville comes in at 3-3. Last week, Stockton beat Du-Pec 28-0, where Orangeville lost to Lena Winslow 46-7. And last week, these two teams met up in Week 9, where Stockton won 40-21. Looking ahead this year, obviously this game is going to be on Saturday in Orangeville. And it's going to be a big game for the Broncos, more so than I think for Stockton. And the reason why is just the fact of the records in itself. You know, a loss for Orangeville sets them back to 3-4, and they still have to play Dakota in Week 8. A loss for Stockton sets them back to 4-3, but they still have East Dubuque and then Dakota. So they have opportunities still to get that 5th or 6th playoff or win, that 5th or 6th win to get into the playoffs. I haven't really broke down the playoff points yet, but just taking a look at what the North versus the South is as far as who's won what. Obviously, the North has more wins versus the South year to date. So pretty much a 5-4 team in the North should make the playoffs, where a 5-4 team in the South is probably going to be on the bubble of making the playoffs, depending on who their crossover was and what other games they have, and of course, what other games help out. Obviously, with Galena beating Amboy and Milledgeville and AFC losing all of their crossover games, the South does not boast anymore unless Forreston beats Lena Winslow, West Carroll beats Du-Pec, and Milledgeville beats Orangeville. That's pretty much what needs to happen for the South to garner any more playoff points in their favor. With that, you know, obviously, I missed the boat on Stockton. Yeah, I know it. I did. That was me. Appreciate the locker room material posts and all that stuff. So, yeah, no, good job, Stockton. You're 4-2, on the cusp of getting that 5th playoff eligible win. Orangeville, on the other hand, you know, I anticipate Orangeville will be a little bit better than where they're at right now. Obviously, they had that loss to Aquin in week 1, the loss to Dubuque, and then the expected loss to Lena Winslow. Really expected a lot more out of their game with Dubuque. They obviously had opportunities in that game with Dubuque to win, but they failed to even get points on the board in what really was an evenly matched game. Obviously, Stockton just came out and full-on throttled Dubuque last week. So, you're going to see a lot of running between both teams, obviously. They both got good backs. You take a look at Garrett Rodebaugh and Jason Herman, and then you look at Carter Kleckler and Hunter Hilly, and then you have Chase Jordan, and then you have Tyler Barch and Andrew Haas. And you could just sit here and keep going on and on and on. Obviously, Stockton's line is going to have the early favorite over Orangeville's line. Stockton's got more size, so Orangeville's going to have to be able to fire off the ball quickly to have an opportunity to get movement on the line to get holes open for their team. In this game, I like the Blackhawks getting their playoff eligible win to get to number 5 and proving me wrong even further of my statement of them not making the playoffs, as I do see Stockton in the playoffs. EPC at Amboy. EPC comes in with a 2-4 mark, where Amboy is 0-6. Last week, EPC lost to Aquin 34-27, where Amboy lost to Galena 41-6. Last year, these two teams met in week 2, where EPC was able to win 26-16. Taking a look at the two teams, you'll take a look at EPC, and we've stated it many times. They have a strong line. They have good athletes. They can make plays. The problem is that they just lack a lot of experience this year and haven't really been able to put everything completely together. You take a look at their rating on their strength of schedule. You take a look at their opponents' win-loss records. And you take a look at the games that they've lost outside of Lena Winslow. And they're like 20 points away from being a 5-1 team going into this game with Amboy. Instead, they're sitting at 2-4. So, Amboy, on the other hand, has had a lot of struggles. Just really no good way of putting it. I mean, they're playing hard. I mean, it's not like they're not doing things the right way, but they lack depth, which hurts them. They may lack some ingenuity in offensive play calling or defensive play calling, as they run a lot of things that they've been running for 30-plus years. I mean, they always say that if it's not broke, don't fix it. But it's broke right now. So you got to do things to fix it. Granted, depth doesn't help, and not having it doesn't help. And that's unfortunately where Amboy sits at right now. I like the athletes that they do have.
Especially Marcus Wynn.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Marcus Wynn's a stud. Obviously, they had to move Henkel to quarterback this year. They have had Brady Jones come in a couple times at quarterback to do some things, whether Henkel got hurt or not. But they've had Jones in there. And then you just take a look overall. They just don't. I mean, last year Amboy was 3-6, but they were putting teams in desperation needs. I mean, they were putting some points up on teams that you were like, wow, but they couldn't finish. And this year, they're not doing either. They're not really scoring off the charts. Their output defensively is actually the worst in the conference right now. Granted, that also comes from the fact that they've played the toughest schedule to this point of all teams. So you really can't hold that against them, as they've played Lena Winslow, they've played Forreston,
West Carroll, Aquin, Du-Pec. I mean, they've had all the big boys.
Right. All the teams that have winning records. I mean, it's crazy.
They unfortunately got the short end of the stick when it came to the scheduling.
Yeah. Here, have these guys.
Thanks.
But in this game, I like EPC in it to win it for win number 3. They need to win it because a loss obviously would put them completely out of the playoffs. And when you have Amboy, AFC, and Forreston left on your schedule, you got to get to 4-4 going into week 9. Aquin at AFC, obviously this is one where the records come in opposite. Aquin comes in at 6-0, AFC at 0-6. Last week, Aquin beat EPC 34-27 in a thriller of a game there, where AFC lost a thriller to Milledgeville in overtime 8-0. Last year, Aquin won this game in week 3, 41-6. This year, obviously, Aquin is a lot stronger, a lot better, and they're definitely, obviously, already in the playoffs with 6 wins. But they're where we expected them to be this season. Taking a look at AFC, obviously, me and you have not seen them play in person yet. That's still to come yet on our schedule. But you take a look at what AFC has done thus far. You know, I know Coach Winterland was trying to go away from just straight up run domination all the time with his option offense and try to get the ball in the air more. But it really hasn't trickled out much as planned. And I think some of that comes to inefficiencies in the offense, in the place games, in your ability to work with the people that you have. But they keep fighting, and you know, they keep playing hard. And like we stated, that's all you can do. If you're not going to take the field and play hard, then you probably should think about why you're on it. Aquin's been really exciting. Obviously, Will Gus has done a lot of big things. He's almost on the cusp of breaking 2,000 career yards passing, which is a stat that I threw out there earlier this year that, you know, he will break that 2,000-yard passing, 1,500-yard rushing mark. Well, actually, at the time, it was 1,000 yards. But he's actually pushing to that 1,500-yard rushing mark as well. So about he should break 2,000 yards this game. I think he's at 1987 going into this game. So if he doesn't get this game, then they had a bad game passing the ball. Let's put it that way. I don't think that's going to happen. But, I mean, it's just remarkable to watch what he has done.
Well, I mean, you can't attribute it. I mean, I think Will Gus is an amazing athlete, but I mean, his big line in front of him certainly helped.
Oh, definitely.
I mean,
you get the improved line play that they've had this year
and their
with the size.
I was going to say, we've talked about it a lot.
With the size that they have, I mean, those boys up front are definitely giving them a lot of protection. They're
and allows him to work his magic.
And they kind of block in a way that's kind of a zone blocking. When he rolls out, you can see them roll with him.
Oh, yeah. They're very well orchestrated.
Yeah. And it's just amazing watching them play. I mean, it's a lot of fun. I mean, some people think they're overhyped, and they might be. I'm not going to say that they might not be overhyped. But the thing is that they're extremely fun to watch. They're extremely fast. They're extremely athletic, which in hindsight makes them extremely dangerous.
They're just a very well-oiled machine.
With a few hiccups that they need to keep improving. But that's every team at this point. The idea is to play your best football come week 10, which is round 1 of the playoffs. This week, though...
Those of you at home.
Yeah, for those of you. Anyway, I like Aquin in this one. Unfortunately, it's going to be big for AFC, much like last year, but unfortunately, it's just the way it falls. This week we head to Savannah, where West Carroll will take on Milledgeville. Milledgeville comes at 1-5 after they collected their first win of the year over AFC in overtime, 8-0. And West Carroll comes in at 4-2 after they had the heart-wrenching loss to Forreston, 38-36, in a back-and-forth affair that actually saw West Carroll down by 2 scores before they finally took off and fought their way back, took a lead late in the game, or late in the third quarter, I should say, not late in the game. And then it was just a seesaw battle after that. Last time these two teams met was back in 2005, back when it was still the NUIC North and South originally, where West Carroll won in week 3, 34-18. So it's been a while since these two teams have met up. But, you know, Milledgeville's obviously had a tough go of it. This year, we are able to see West Carroll play. We've seen both these two teams play over the course of the last 2 seasons on a regular basis. Obviously, Milledgeville lost a lot of talent off of last year's teams, and you can see some of those troubling woes due to lack of size, really. It's not that they don't have talent. They do have a lot of talent. They just don't have a lot of size to match up with the teams that they're playing, unfortunately. West Carroll, obviously, they have a little bit of size, but they're more built around speed and structure, and it fits their spread offense very well, especially with a dual threat quarterback like Derek Tracy. And they've really done a lot of good things this year to put themselves on par to get into the playoffs. This game obviously would be that situation where they can win it, get that 5th win to become playoff eligible. And, you know, overall, they're pretty much right where we expected them to be at this point in the season. Their one loss is to EPC, and then, of course, the loss to Forreston. And if you look back at the beginning of the year, I would have told you that they should have lost to Dakota, too. But they were able to pull off the upset of Dakota. They did lose to EPC in a game that, looking back now, you think, man, how did West Carroll lose to EPC? And then, of course, the loss here to Forreston just this past week that really took a lot of people by surprise across the conference and opened up some eyes as far as what Forreston is and what Forreston can do and what they haven't been doing correctly, at least in that game against West Carroll. Looking at this game, though, you know, I don't see a whole lot of opportunity for Milledgeville to be successful with West Carroll. I mean, I think what Milledgeville needs to do is somewhat similar to what they did against Forreston last year in the playoffs. Give up the run game, go to a spread offense, open it up, and try to throw the ball a little bit to make some opportunities happen for you. Because West Carroll is one of those teams that, you know, they're physical. They're not big, but they're coming up to hit you. They remind me of Milledgeville from last year. Not big, but they're fast and they're going to come hit you. And you know, they have the ability to slow down or shut down a run game. Granted, last week they gave up 374 yards to Forreston, but they put up 422 yards of offense on Forreston. And that's going to be a tall task for Milledgeville to take on here. So I really like the Thunder in this game for win number 5. We move into our game of the week, which is really game of the year, and a lot of people across the state are paying attention to this one as Lena Winslow travels to Forreston. Number 1 versus number 1, 6-0 versus 6-0. Last week, Lena Winslow beat Orangeville 46-7, and Forreston won 38-36 over West Carroll. Last year, Lena Winslow won this game in the regular season 36-16, but it was Forreston getting the last laugh in the semifinals 34-28 as they moved on to win the state championship for the 3rd time in 5 seasons. You look at these two teams, obviously they have a lot of history going back over the last 13 years when they actually became in the NUIC Northwest Conference as division rivals. And for the longest part, Lena Winslow's really controlled the games against Forreston. I mean, if you take a look at their records against each other, I'm not sure exactly what it is, but I know that Forreston has only won one time ever against Lena Winslow in Forreston, and that came in 2016 when Forreston went perfect 14-0 and won state that year. They're going to need a big effort against Lena Winslow this year. They have a team that I think can push Lena Winslow, and it's definitely a game that Lena Winslow needs to come ready to play. Quite a few questions are coming up on Lena Winslow's mentality here of sorts. You know, they had the close game against Stockton where they won 30-0. They were only up 22-7 against Orangeville at halftime last week. But you also take a look at those two games, and Lena Winslow put up their 2 highest yardage outputs of the year in back-to-back games. They had 468 yards of offense against Stockton, and they had over 550 yards against Orangeville. So they're averaging 440 yards of offense right now. They also are only giving up 160 yards on defense. They did give up a touchdown to Orangeville, so their first-string defense is only giving up 13 points on the season. Take a look at what Forreston has done as well. They just came off of a tough game against West Carroll. They had their first game of the year against Dakota, where they played sloppily in a game that they pretty much controlled the whole time, and ended up pulling away in that one for a 30-12 win. Outside of that, every game in between, they've run and clocked their opponents. Granted, they have not had the hardest of schedules thus far, but they have garnered a lot of experience, getting a lot of kids playing time, much like Lena Winslow has done as well. It's a big game. These two teams have combined for 5 of the last 6 Class 1A state titles. You take a look back to 2009, and between the two schools, I think they have made it past the quarterfinals every year, except 3 times is it. Well, no, I take that back. Forreston did not make it in 09 or 10. But after that, they've been in it every year but once. So that would be 5 times. 3 for Forreston and 2 for Lena Winslow. Obviously, the last 3 years, though, they've really been the 2 teams that everybody's paid attention to. 2016, they started off ranked and then quickly jumped up to being top ranked. Lena Winslow had a slow start in 2016, but they eventually met up in the quarterfinals where Forreston took care of them handily. Then in 2017, it was Lena Winslow's turn, in some very tight contests. And then you take a look at 2018 where they actually split games, but they still had 2 years in a row where they've met in the semifinals. Taking a look at some of the projections this year, this is a game that, regardless of who wins, they're on a crash course for possibly, most likely, a second round meeting. Not a first round, obviously, but a second round. There is the opportunity of a quarterfinal matchup, depending on if anything happens that shouldn't happen. But the chances of them meeting in the semifinals again is not going to happen, most likely. I mean, it would take some upsets for that to take place. So, obviously this game isn't the one that you need to win, as they're both already in the playoffs. It's one you want to win, because conference championship is not on the line for either of these teams in this game, since they're cross-divisional. So this is really just a pride game of who's better than who. In years past, this would be a conference championship type game, but with the restructure of the conferences, it's not. So now it's just two teams going at it, and you know, obviously you want to get the win so you can have the better chance of a higher seed for more home games. But we've also seen where that doesn't always play out. You know, sometimes you see the middle of the road teams get more home games in the playoffs than the top seed teams, all depending on how things play out. But, oh man, this is a game that you got to get up and get ready for. This is your test to see what you stack up against as you get prepared for the playoffs. It's one of the great things about this game being so late in the season is because it is so close to the playoffs. And it's excitement, pure excitement. When you get games like these, they're always fun. Obviously, with Forreston's performance against West Carroll, they could see a slight drop in the rankings, which would, if that were to happen, that would put Lena Winslow at number 1. And I don't remember who it was, but I remember somebody stating that they expected Lena Winslow to be ranked number 1 when these two teams faced. And I believe that was Matt Strohecker who told me that. Well, that could become true. They were both tied at number 1 this past week, and depending on what the voters do this week, Forreston could be knocked out of that number 1 spot. And if they are, that could just be enough fuel to that fire to ignite them for this game as well. But I like the Panthers in this game. This is a huge game. Rick usually has his guys ready for the big ones. And I feel that Lena Winslow is on a revenge tour this year from last year.
My only concern is, can the Panthers play 4 quarters? I know we overheard people down in Forreston last week saying this was really the first time Forreston had played 4 quarters all year, and they could see it in the guys. I thought Forreston still maintained a great performance, though obviously West Carroll really put them through to a test. But I'm going to have to agree with you and take my alma mater and go with the Panthers.
Our Benchwarmers Player of the Week, again, another week where we had quite a few players that really excelled or shined to bring their teams to prominence. But we go to 2 schools that we have not selected yet, as they had some big-time plays in what were seen as big-time games. One was our Game of the Week, and the other one could have easily been our Game of the Week. So, without further ado, our North recipient of our Benchwarmers Player of the Week this week is Jason Herman, a running back from Stockton. Jason had 151 yards rushing with 2 touchdowns as the Blackhawks won 28-0 over Du-Pec, as they fed off of both myself and Du-Pec Superfan. So congratulations, Jason, on that honor. And in the South, it's going to Forreston running back Jordan Neuschwander. Jordan had 115 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns in what was a great battle with West Carroll, where the Cardinals pulled it out 38-36. Obviously, as winners of our Benchwarmers Player of the Week, you receive a free extra large pizza and wings, courtesy of Benchwarmers. Thanks to Eric White for being able to help support what we do here and promote our Player of the Week as well. We appreciate his sponsorship on that. Obviously, we have a little bit of change to our Power 5, but the top 3 still remain the same. Number 1.
Can you guess?
Lena Winslow, 6-0. And number 2?
Forreston Cardinals.
At 6-0. Number 3?
Aquin Bulldogs.
Also 6-0. At number 4, we go with the West Carroll Thunder. Despite their loss last week at moving to 4-2.
It was a heck of a game.
Yep, they were in that game.
The entire time, absolutely. I mean, it was...
You really can't pull them out of the Power 5 with the loss because of the fact that they only lost to Forreston by 2 points. Mm-hmm. You take a look at the wins that they do have. I mean, they have the loss to EPC, but their win against Dakota is a good quality win for the West Carroll Thunder. So West Carroll's at number 4. And coming back into our Power 5 for the second time this season are the Stockton Blackhawks, as they improved to 4-2 with that big win over Du-Pec last week, knocking the Rivermen out of the Power 5.
How do you like your crow?
I like it medium, served with some sauce. Okay? Yes, I know.
A1, all right.
Yep, I missed the boat on Stockton. They've proven me wrong, which is great. That's just the way I like it, to be honest. You know, every now and then you sit here and you try to feel things out.
No, seriously, that is the beauty of the NUIC.
It is. You never know what you're going to get.
Okay, Forrest.
On any given week. And, yeah, no, Stockton's definitely put a number to me this year. So, hey, it happens. And you know what? I couldn't be any happier. I mean, obviously, we've talked great things about what Coach Snyder and his staff has done at Stockton, the direction that they've taken that program since his arrival at Stockton, and they continue to do great things. So, good job to the Blackhawks. Hopefully, you guys continue on as with all of our teams, but this week, there's a lot of good games to get to, a lot of games that have a lot of meaning behind them for both teams involved. Obviously, some teams are holding on to playoff lives. Others are trying to clinch or get that playoff eligible win. So, you know, get out to the game, support your teams, support your communities. As always, root for the NUIC.